So good morning, everybody. I know the folks are filling in the room. Welcome to First Friday. I am your host, Philip Aldifer here at Cloud Coaching. And for those of you who may not have been on a First Friday call before, just a quick introduction. This is a monthly call that we do here at Cloud with folks from the real estate industry, businesses outside of real estate, athletic performers, folks from around the world that we think are going to deliver value to you and have interesting experiences to share. And today's guest, I can't tell you how excited I am to bring you today's guest, Holly Brooks. Holly Brooks is also an Alaskan resident here in Anchorage, two-time U.S. Olympian, Vancouver in 2010 and Sochi in 2014. You gonna get that right? Two-time competitor in world champ in the sport of Nordic skiing, if I didn't make that clear. Two-time competitor in world champs, 5 years on the World Cup ski circuit, part of the American Revolution that brought the United States from international middle of the pack to eventual winners. So at a very interesting moment in time in a very interesting sport. And I am thrilled that Holly is joining us today. Holly, good morning. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me and inviting me on to share a little bit of perspective with your team.
Love it. So just a reminder, if you are on the call with us live and you want to throw comments in the chat, please do. We've got Jen Soriano, amazing assistant monitoring the chat for us, and we'll keep up to speed on anything that you want to say or share. Love to hear where you're watching this webinar from. If you want to throw your location in the chat, we'd love to hear from you. But I thought we'd begin simply with your background, Holly. You came out of a family that skied, but did not, if I got this, you didn't ski in college. Is that correct? You didn't ski in the NCAA?
I did ski in college, but I was, as I say, never really any good. So up in Seattle, Washington, my dad was my coach. My siblings were my teammates. I skied in college, but I never made NCAA championships, which is absolutely a staple for anyone who is really going to go anywhere in the sport. The pretty specific developmental pipeline, and here was the pipeline, and I was over here, right in right field. So to make kind of a long story short, I moved to Alaska after undergraduate, and I live in the snow. I had developed a deep intrinsic love for my sport. I got involved in coaching, ski coaching specifically. And I like to say I skied for fun and I skied for work. I found peers who like to do intervals after work, and other people are going out to bars and I'm doing intervals.
Got it.
Yeah, and as I like to say, I accidentally got in very good shape.
Got it.
Then I was coaching and hopped in a couple of races, started doing really well, kind of made some excuses like, oh, that was a fluke, or that success was, I was just lucky. But then it happened enough times where I couldn't deny it anymore. And I made my first Olympic team when I was working as a full-time coach at age 27. And it was really kind of a Cinderella story. Most are, a competitive athlete and then a coach, not the other way around.
Not the other way around. Yeah. Now, I want to go back, though. That's interesting. What? I'm not quite sure the question I'm trying to ask. Knowing what you know now, would you have accepted your success earlier, do you think? If you look back on it, is there something that would you have said, no, I'm actually really good at this, and would you have done anything differently?
I would not have done anything differently. And it's really interesting because most of the people that I've been on, most of my teammates on Olympic teams or national teams, they were all identified very early in life. Yeah. They were groomed, they were, all kinds of teams as young athletes, and, they were identified very early in life. And I wasn't. And I think that that's almost like it's been a protective factor in my development. And, I did it because I loved it. I didn't do it because I was good at it. Right. And time when you are good at something, maybe you start out really loving it, but then it becomes your identity. Right. And then, I often see athletes' self-worth really wrapped up in their success, and they have a hard time separating their self-worth from their results. Right. And so I, growing up and being, not very good, right, was a mechanism for me, and it really kind of got me through. And I've really relied on my intrinsic motivation and love of the sport. And I had a voluntary retirement, meaning I didn't have to stop because of injury or burnout or anything like that. It was on my terms, and I still have this very cherished relationship with the sport today, and I
Yep.
wouldn't have it any other way.
Got it. Interesting. That's a really interesting. I mean, yeah, it's a different way to approach something that some people, as you said, are groomed to do. You're put in a track from such an early stage. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So you land on your first U.S. Olympic team, and what did you find? What did you discover when you're now in this environment?
Well, it was a bit of a shock. I raced my first World Cup maybe 2 weeks before the Olympics. And, most of the other people at the Olympics had been racing World Cups for literally years. I had never traveled over
Yeah.
to race in a World Cup. And so it was a little bit of a shock to the system. By the time I got there, I feel like I was already pretty tired.
Yeah.
It was really just an accomplishment to make it.
Right.
And I think the day I flew out of Alaska, the front page of the Anchorage Daily News read "Coaches in the Games." Like flying, I was also like on the front page of the newspaper, and
Yeah.
high-fiving me on the plane, and it was a big emotional journey. And I have to say, once I got there, I was already a little bit exhausted, right,
Yeah.
and overstimulated just because it was all so new. But it was really, really incredible. Plus, it was in Vancouver. I had so many friends and colleagues and people come down from Alaska and up from Seattle. So
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
a really, really special situation, and it really allowed me to kind of kick off the next quad, which is what we talk about Olympic cycles, because it's every 4
Okay.
years. And then from there, I was able to join the national team and be a part of this American Revolution that you referenced intro.
Yeah. Talk about that a little bit, because when we had our earlier conversation, that was an interesting moment in the history of the team. It sounds like, anyway, from the outside, a transitional moment in the way the team was performing.
So cross-country skiing, if you're not familiar with it, I think of it like track and field, but the winter version of track and field. So, it's an endurance sport, but we have everything from the sprint to the marathon and between. And it really is a European-dominated sport. Scandinavians are especially dominant. And, World Cups don't normally take place in North America, right? We're actually, this upcoming season, we're having our first World Cup in Minneapolis in, I don't know, 20 years or something. So, Nordic skiing, or Americans in Nordic skiing, we were underdogs, right? We were really nowhere. We were not, scoring points. We were just kind of, it's almost like you would look at the result sheet and you would start at the bottom and look up.
Got it.
And I joined the team, and, there were some other really instrumental people on the team. And at one point, we had this group of really, really strong women, and we kind of came together as a group and said, what can we do differently? Right? Not necessarily fun, being these underdogs, or, kind of, being in the bottom part of the result sheet. And I will say, Keegan Randall, one of our leaders on the team, she was up there individually, but it was kind of Keegan, and then the rest of the team was down there. So we really took a look at it and said, what can we do differently? Right? Because you can't do the same thing and expect different results, right? I think that's nice. And we took this opportunity to say, what if we decided to stop competing with each other, start, collaborating and communicating and cooperating as a team? And what if we could take on the other teams and use more of a teamwork approach? Because, to be clear, Nordic skiing is an individual sport in a team context. We have a relay, but most of our races are, it's the individual on the result sheet. So, I think leading up to this moment, there was a lot of people wanting to be the best one on the team, or, lots of maybe unhealthy rivalries, a lot of, I guess, ego in it, right? And we really took this opportunity to rethink our model and kind of put our individual egos aside and take this teamwork approach. And it was incredible to be a part of this. This was back in 2012. We had our first relay podium, which was instrumental. And still to this day, people talk about the relay that we won. We didn't win. We were in a photo finish for third. But the rest of the world was like, where did you guys come from? How did you do that? And it was a result of our new approach.
Yeah. Who brought that idea to the table? How did that become the model?
That's a really good question. And, I think it was a little bit of a top down and bottom up approach, meaning our coach, kind of asked the open-ended question, what might we do differently, to move forward into the next season, right? And so he kind of opened that up. And then it was actually some of the athletes, right, who said, what if we take a new approach and work together? So, sometimes like decisions are made from the down and it's, you shall do this, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
like, hey, what if we do this? But I think it came from both angles, right? So our head coach asked the question, what can you do differently? And then some of the idea was almost brainstormed by members of our team. And
interesting.
I will just say, everyone on the team had a different strength, and everyone on the team today still does have a different strength. And we were able to bring those strengths to the table and share them, right? Versus like, hey, this is my strength and I'm going to keep it over here and I'm not going to let you in on this secret, right? So whoever was really good at downhill cornering would say, I'm really good at downhill cornering. Follow me on this line.
Follow me.
We did that, right? And then someone else would say, I'm really good at starts. Let's go practice starts over here. And this is what I think about, right? So all of a sudden we were, we had our cards and we were holding them tightly, but then we were just coming to the table with our cards, just open and ready to share. And that was extremely instrumental. And we went from being really nowhere, right, on the international stage to having that breakout relay performance in 2012. And there was this cartoon made of us actually, and we were coined the American Revolution. And from then on, it's, I love the confetti.
That's right.
It's, it just became contagious, right? Once you've done it once, it's like Roger Bannister breaking the 4-minute mile, right? No one thought it was possible. Roger Bannister breaks the 4-minute mile, and then all of a sudden, everyone breaks the 4-minute mile.
Everybody does it.
Yes. And from then on, it has just rolled. And, in 2018, 2 of the girls that were on that 4-person relay brought home the Olympic gold medal. Alaska's Odin Randall and Jessie Diggett, they brought home the Olympic gold in 2018. So that was just 6 years later. So now we're known as a powerhouse on the international stage. And it really was because this paradigm shift that we made.
Yeah. And I love the open-ended question from the coach, right? We talk about that within our coaching company a lot, the idea that the client is creative, resourceful, and whole. So, if you're coming with the answer, you're sort of denying the talent and the capacity of the people that you have the privilege of coaching. So just ask the open-ended. What happens when you ask the open-ended question? But I'm curious, you had type A competitive powerhouse athletes on the team. You have to have established some degree of like safe space, a psychological safe space in order to open up. Like, how did that develop? I think that's an interesting challenge that a lot of teams and businesses face, is creating an environment where people feel comfortable opening up.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, the psychological safety is incredibly important, right? Because I would say Olympic athletes are probably some of the most competitive people in the world, right?
Yeah.
By win, right?
Yep.
And it's really, really important. We had to realize that coming together was going to be performative and advantageous to all of us, right? So we really we looked at examples, and our coach had this quote that we talked about all the time. You don't have to be best friends, but you absolutely need to be best teammates. That set this realistic standard, and we talked a lot about what does it look like, right, to be best teammates. What are those behaviors? How do you approach conflict, right? And we had these like proactive discussions, but it was all housed in this, hey, if we can come together and if we can learn how to work together, and then it's going to benefit all of us, right? Because it can't be Holly versus Keegan. It needs to be the US versus Norway. Right?
Versus Norway. Yeah.
It was presented to us as this is incredibly important for performance, right? And your outcome objectives, right? And we need to talk about the process. What does being a teammate, what does that entail, right? How are you going to deal with conflict? Like, how are we going to treat each other on a daily basis? How are we going to be reciprocal in putting our cards down, right? If you share, you also need to share, right?
Yeah.
It really was this process of developing trust, right? And it doesn't just happen overnight. And I don't, if you or anyone else on this call is familiar with Brene Brown's like metaphor, how she talks about trust, but I love this. I talk about it all the time. She talks about how trust is like a jar of marbles, right? And you have a jar, and trust is built slowly, one marble at a time. So you do something you say you're going to do, boom, right? Like one marble in the jar, right? You share a tip or trick with a teammate, another marble in the jar.
Marble in the jar. Yeah.
So it takes time to build up this trust, but then all of a sudden you have this jar full of marbles, right? And you can move forward with that. So we really had a lot of open-ended discussion about what does it look like to build trust, right? And then we were just slowly putting marbles in the jar, right? I don't know if that makes sense, but I love that analogy. And for the last couple of months, I feel like I've been talking about trust so much. I really want to get a jar.
Physical jar of marbles. I love that. So was that, I'm very curious about the process. Were you structural in those discussions, or was it organic, right? If we think from a leadership perspective and we want to cultivate a culture of trust, we want to build that within our own teams. Would you, both based on your experiences and now your role as a coach and a counselor around high performance, would you suggest that is there benefit in being structured, or is there greater benefit in letting that be organic? If that question makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be twofold. Just like I said, our progression was top down, bottom up. Like if I think of structured, I think of that as being top down, organic. I think of that as being bottom up. And I think the combination of the two, right? Okay. And there's, to use your word, synergy that has to happen. For that. I think if we're just sitting around hoping that it's going to be organic, you sure as heck better have the right people in place with the right ideas, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so the structural part, I think, can come from the coaches, right? To say, hey, we're moving into a new market, right? We're moving into a tighter market in terms of the number of houses, right? We need evolve with this market. We need to think about doing something different, right? And even asking, that open-ended question, right, that our coach asked us, what might we do different, right? What new tactic or new lens can we take, right? And that, give an opportunity for some of the people in your team or on your group to speak up, right, and share their thought. And if it doesn't come organically, be prepared to ask additional follow-up opening questions, right?
Yeah. I love that perspective. That you need both. You can't rely exclusively on right? It lacks that natural reaction, whatever. Yeah. Interesting. Now, when you were working on that, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, were you focused on, well, I know you were focused on process, but how did the conversations, because typically you might say, we're going to expect results, we want to win, this is the objective is winning. It sounds like your conversations were very different,
Yeah.
though. Yeah.
So, obviously as competitive people, we have an outcome, right? So in terms of athletics, we want results, we want podiums specifically. We want the hardware, right? We want the
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
it's really important to say, okay, this is the outcome goal. How do we make that happen? Right. And I think I shared with you in my coaching and counseling practice, I talk a lot about what I call the 95-5 rule. And it's this idea that of course we have those outcome results. And for me, it's a podium, for your group, it's revenue, right? Or a number of houses sold, right? Of course you have that. But if that is your focal point and it's, I have to sell houses, oh my goodness, I have to sell houses, right? Or for me as an athlete, if it's like, I have to get on the podium, I have to win, I have to, get on the podium, I have to bring home the medals, that is just going to add pressure in an unproductive way, right? So yes, we had the goal to get on the podium, but then we really had to take a step back and say, what is the process to get there, right? What is the how, right? Like it's consistency at practice. It is showing up and working on the technical skills. It is taking turns in a reciprocal manner and, sharing our tactics and our technique, right? It is making sure that we're good on our recovery days. It is talking about sleep and nutrition, right? So it's all of the how. So absolutely, we have those outcome goals, right? But we really need to focus on the how and the process goals. And that is ultimately how we achieve the outcome, right? So I say the 95-5, it's 95% of our time, our effort, and our conversation needs to be focused on how we're going to do it, right? And 5% on the outcome. And hey, when you have competitive people, the outcome, we're already competitive, we're already driven. We don't actually need to focus on that component of it. We need to focus on humanizing and personifying and focusing on how we're going to make that happen. And then the goals, they take care of themselves.
I have to imagine though that like whether it's the U.S. Ski Federation or the Olympic, whoever they are, the people the people who run the team. I mean, were they open to that, or did you fight against that with them? I mean, the folks for whom the outcome is the only, the thing, the measure.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because after I retired from sport, I was on the ski and snowboard board of directors. And at one point we were talking about our like mission statements and stuff like that. And, there was some language that was very medals first driven. And I feel like the whole athletic movement has gone through this medals first to athlete first, evolution, I guess. And I remember having this discussion with people on the board and I said, hey, we don't need to have, medals in our mission statement. These people are already inherently the most competitive people you will ever find. They're putting way too much pressure on themselves already, right? So we need to have more person first, right? Human first language. So, I think people really close to the sport know that, but people maybe more loosely affiliated to the sport, it took a little bit of convincing. I really feel like the whole Olympic movement, has gone through this. We need to see athletes as people first. And, the pressure is already there.
Yeah. Yeah. That top performer, that whatever, the prototypical type A performer, they're going to bring the pressure on themselves. Right.
Absolutely. So it's our job, it's the coach's job and creating a culture where they're going to feel held, right? And where they're going to feel a sense of safety and where they're going to feel like they still have value, even if they don't meet that that performance goal, because that's what's going to keep them and hold them, into achieving that performance goal the next time, right?
Into
Versus
achievement. Yeah.
floating, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've seen all the stories and all those examples of one and done athletes or one and done performers, folks that get burnt out, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Right. About the last couple of Olympic cycles, and we had Simone Biles, right? She had the twisties, and people gave her a lot of flack, but guess what? She was able to step back, take some time off, and she's back stronger than ever, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
same thing, she kind of folded at the Olympic Games, but then she was able to kind of step back and connect with herself, and then come back stronger than ever. So we have to create an environment where athletes or teams or realtors feel like they're valued as a person, not just as a revenue source or a source of metals.
Yeah. Yeah. I would love it. You and I shared the story, and I had not heard this before. The Charlene, what's her last name? The marathon runner. Yeah, just
Yeah.
like the idea that, and the reason I'm going there now is that I think it's a great example of the ways in which top performers will continue to push. There's no, like, the best will seek high levels of performance. If you'd be willing to share the Trellan Flanagan story, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, when I think about rivalries, like rivalries are really responsible for bringing forward breakthroughs, right?
Yeah.
And when you have a team and people aren't willing to work together, I think it's good to have examples of some of the most elite people in their field. Let's look at what they did, right? So we have Shalane Flanagan, who is arguably one of the best marathon runners in the world. She was the first American to win the New York City Marathon in 40 years. I don't remember exactly what year that was, but essentially Shalane Flanagan has had 11 training partners over her career, and every single one of them made the Olympic team with her, right? So Shalane Flanagan, one of the best competitors, what did she do? She took her biggest competitor and she said, "Hey, do you want to come be my teammate?" And so she realized that those people, bringing those people into her fold, right, was instrumental in her success. So she could have easily said, "Hey, I feel really threatened by this person. I'm not going to let them know what I'm doing. There's no way I'm going to invite them to join on this run, or I'm not going to let them see my plan." Right?
Yeah.
And she said no. She did the same thing that we did, as a ski team. She held her cards down. She said, "Hey, you
Exactly.
come here." And I think it was 2016, her training partner, Amy Craig, they were in the Olympic marathon trials, and it's one and done. It's trials, the top 3 make it to the Olympics. Done. It was really hot outside, and it was Amy Craig, her training partner, started to fade, and Shalane waited a little bit, held back, and said, "Hey, Amy, like, we got to go," right? So she almost like sacrificed her position and her performance, and they surged forward. And then with 3 miles to go, Shalane was starting to fade, and Amy was like, "Hey, slow down a little bit. Shalane, let's go. At the end of the trials, they both made it.
Yeah.
Right? And so it was that iron sharpens iron, right? And so it's actually coined the Shalane effect, right? And it's this process of her bringing in her rivals, right? Making them her teammates, and then they both excel. So I love that example, because if you have people on your teams that are protective and you come more from that fear-based model, or I want, this all self, it's really great to have these examples at the top end of sport or whatever their fields, and say, "Hey, this is an example of what can happen. Can we move forward and farther together?"
Yeah. I think that I was thinking, after our conversation earlier this week, I was thinking about the Doris Kearns Goodwin book, right? Team of Rivals. Exactly the thing that Abraham Lincoln did when he was building his first post-war cabinet. He had to bring in political leaders from both the North and the South. I mean, people, literally just, standing on the other side of a barricade, shooting at each other effectively, and now we're going to put together this team of rivals to lead the country and go in a new direction. From your position now as a counselor and a coach, how would you train that or coach to that open hand? If you got an athlete, if you were working with somebody who came to you with that sort of closed fist, keep it tight approach, are there things you would do to develop that openness in someone?
That's a really good question, because some people are going to be very hesitant, right? And they're going to hold their cards tightly. And so I think, again, we have to point to the examples, and, we have to say, hey, look at what Shalane did, right? Look at what Abraham Lincoln did. Look at, and I have this other example of, the Norwegian downhill men, which maybe we'll get to that, or maybe not.
Yeah.
And say, and if you have that person who is a little closed off, maybe you present these stories to them, and don't provide the conclusion. Present the stories, and again, this is kind of using some motivational interviewing techniques. What do you notice? What's the take home here? Is there anything you can learn from these people who are at the pinnacle, right, of their field, right? And so I would present these different anecdotes, which are factual, right? You cannot argue against the fact that every single teammate that Shalane has had has also made the Olympic team, right?
Yeah.
What do you notice, right? So again, it can't be the top down, hey, listen to this story, or you need to do this. Some of the openness or the motivation, or at least the curiosity, right, needs to come from that person. So it's almost like you're suggesting and you're asking. And again, that trust isn't going to happen overnight. It's my marble, right? And if your team isn't familiar with Brene Brown's, her anatomy of trust, right? I would absolutely check that out. She has this acronym. It's braving, and
that's right.
And so check out like all those. I'm trying to, one is like boundaries, and, one is vault, and right. So there are all these different components of trust, right? So if you're trying to build a sense of psychological safety, right, among your team, maybe you can use that as a model or a framework, right? They develop trust amongst our team. And also, how can this be, or do you even see it as performative and mutually beneficial, to all of us? And we need to think about evolving in this tighter market. How are we going to do so?
Yeah.
Right. How are we going to do so? Because the same tactics that we've used in the past are not going to work. And if we're not evolving, other groups are.
Yeah.
So how can we, I always talk about coping ahead, right? How can we anticipate?
Well,
right? How can we anticipate the changes and then, apply a different model or a different philosophy?
Would you begin with trust? Like if you were building that, the foundation?
I think trust is the foundation of everything, really.
Everything. Yeah.
And, sometimes it's kind of like, do you come into a situation and do you think some people, I guess, maybe come in and they think maybe they have trust automatically? Trust, is it earned? Or do you just start with it? And different personalities have different approaches to that. But, it really is up to the team leader to, kind of set the expectation, talk about kind of codes of conduct. How do we treat each other? And then it's having the right people to suggest and buy in, right?
And buy in. Yeah.
To what does trust look like? What does it tangibly look like?
Yeah. Trust. And I love the word you use. Is it performative? Does it work? Does it generate outcomes? If you have examples, if you have stories, if you can point to it, then
Mm-hmm.
you can you're handling one of the three objections that I see when people sort of struggle in hitting their goals, right? Either they don't know how to do the thing,
Yeah.
they don't want to do the thing, they haven't made the choice to whatever to put in the effort or whatever it is, but or they don't think it will work, right? They come to it with doubt. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I need, but I don't believe it. I don't think that's the path. I don't think it'll work. If you've got performative examples,
Exactly.
kind of hard
Exactly.
to argue. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. And I don't know if you want me to share the other, example of the Norwegian downhill
I
men.
would love that. Yeah, if you would give sort of a little background on that, because that almost that siege mentality, even if you're already the best in the world, you can still create like us versus them, and we can win as a group.
Yeah.
There's power in that. Yeah.
So a little bit of background, and for the people who are maybe slow to buy into this process, as we've discussed, it's really great to have examples, right? And so, the U.S. women's cross country team, where the American Revolution, right? Then we have the Shalane effect, and then another example, and they have been in the media for this, but it's the Norwegian alpine men's team. And it's interesting if you look at any Olympic Games, summer, winter, there's always the medal count, right? Like this is the revenue, right?
It's on the back of the Wheaties box all the time. I know. Yeah, yeah, we watch it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what country is normally at the top of the winter medal count? It's Norway. And here we have Norway, a country of 5 million people, right? So their population is extremely small. And that leads to the question, how is a country that is so small, how are they able to top the medal count? Right? And so, they're usually, winning, if not in podium position. Right. So I just wanted to play a little clip, and this is a clip of Adam Grant and his podcast Work Life. And I love the tagline of Work Life. It's how to make work not suck.
Yeah.
But if you're not familiar with Adam Grant, he's an organizational psychologist. He's brilliant. And I can't say enough great things about this podcast. This is actually a really old podcast, and it's about rivalry and teammates. And they are talking about the Norwegian men's team. And so I'm going to play a short clip, and they're talking about the culture within the men's alpine team, and then we'll talk about it here in a moment.
Yeah, perfect.
The owed respect on the Norwegian alpine team isn't just about equal treatment in practice and at meals. They all help one another in competitions too, even as they're trying to beat one another. You can see it in the way they communicate in the biggest races in the world. In 2006, Axel was at his first Olympics in Italy. After the race had already started, the weather took a turn for the worse.
All of a sudden, the clouds really came rolling in and got super foggy. The difference between start number 1 that had gone in the sunshine and whoever, start number 15 or 20 that was going to go next was just so big that everyone could see that this is kind of a joke.
So they started the race over the next day. But 2 other skiers on the Norwegian team had already been down the ski run.
Which is crazy when you think about it, because that means that they had tried the course and they got to go on the same course over again.
It's a huge advantage.
It's a huge advantage. But what they did is that they tried to take me and Ahmad through the course turn by turn to tell us how it was.
Did it ever cross your mind, though, like, holy cow, these people are potentially giving up Olympic medals to help me?
Yeah. There was
Do you think that's normal?
Well, I think it didn't seem that crazy, actually. I mean, it seemed like a really good, smart thing to do.
Axel didn't win, but his teammates also got the extra information about the slopes, and one of them ended up with the gold medal. Like running, skiing is an individual sport. It's supposed to be zero-sum. Every skier for him or herself. Their livelihoods and their legacies depend on beating their rivals.
In order for someone to win, someone has to lose.
But here are skiers vying for the Olympic gold medal, telling their competitors everything they know about the course. A Nordic code of humility, known as janteloven, states that no one is better than anyone else. The philosophy is introduced in their youth sports programs, which generally focus more on learning and development than individual rankings.
There is a culture of sharing at all levels, and we compete when we have to.
This is Tara Overbo. He was an Olympic rower, and now he's the director of Olympiatoppen, the Norwegian organization for training elite athletes. He stresses that even in a highly competitive individual sport, you can still have a team where people try to make each other better. despite the fact that on race day, you might lose to your teammate.
We think it's a better way to achieve the highest performance levels possible for individuals if they don't have to compete all the time. They should share knowledge, they should share secrets, because the point is not to beat the kid on the other side of the street or in the neighboring city or in the neighboring valley. It should be about beating those that do not speak Norwegian.
Very good.
That's a great phrase. Beat the people who don't speak Norwegian. Yeah.
I love that clip though. So again, these are the most competitive people in the world. And that story, that anecdote, they were competing for, to be the Olympic champion, right? And what did they do in this situation? They said, hey, we're going to come together as Team Norway. We're going to share what we know, and we're going to all be better because of it. And so this is just another example to say, hey, moving forward in this tighter market, we cannot just be a group of individuals. How can we be like Axel Svendal, right? And say, hey, we need to use our rivalries in a healthy way, in a cooperative way, because guess what? Success is contagious. And if I can help you sell a house, maybe you'll help me sell a house. Absolutely. And then look at the revenue of our whole group, right? Or something like that. So I love that example, right? And that really reflects what we did as an American, as the American ski revolution, the women on the team. We said, hey, we need to just stop competing with each other, right? Even though ultimately we are, right? But to work together, we need to work together, and then we can all move forward, right? Or we can work together and all figure out how to sell more houses, even though there's fewer to sell, right?
And fewer to sell. Absolutely. I mean, that's it. And we're moving into an environment where we would expect that to be the case for probably the rest of the year and into 2024, right? Between economic uncertainty and national elections and industry changes, right? We expect there to be less. And yet I think there's real lessons in that we can all achieve more.
Exactly.
We just need to make sure that all the houses are sold by people who speak Norwegian, or whatever our metaphor is going to be.
Yeah. And when we spoke the other day, we talked about this scarcity mindset, right, versus abundance mindset, and moving forward when there are fewer houses and a lot of economic uncertainty and high interest rates, right? Mm-hmm. I imagine that there is some fear, right, in the industry. And I shared a quote with you that I would love to share with the group. And, this is by another Olympic runner. I mean, I feel like sports are a great metaphor for life, right? So this is Alexi Pappas. And I just wanted to share this quote that she has. Yeah. And she says, when fear is your primary motivation, you become fueled by desperation rather than passion. Desperation and passion are the opposite ends of the same spectrum. But while passion is as a magnetic force that attracts success and inspires people, desperation does the opposite. Mm-hmm. And so, first thought or maybe gut instinct is, maybe there's some fear, right? Mm-hmm. Moving forward, mm-hmm. right? It is really important to acknowledge that maybe that fear exists, but how do we move forward in a productive way that is going to be more competitive and evolve, right, with mm-hmm. the market. And you and mm-hmm. I talked about the relational component, right, of realty. And I think I shared with you, just the practice that I had, or the interactions that I had with a realtor that we've used in the past. She was extremely relational. It didn't feel like she was coming from a place of fear where she had to get to buy, the certain house. And had she done that, had she been coming from a place of fear, we would have said, whoa, we're not you, right? Yeah. And so it really came from this place where it felt like she was passionate, right? It felt like she was listening to us, what we needed and wanted, as buyers, right? And she really moved forward, right, mm-hmm. in that, that successful, magnetic way. And she kept us on board, right? And so if we think about realty as being this like relational practice, I think that, as the number of houses and exchanges go down, we're going to need to be better in our relationships, right? In a more competitive market, how can we come from a place of passion, right? Rather than a place of desperation.
Desperation. Yeah.
It might be close, right? It's it's not going to function well. It's not going to come off well, at least from my perspective.
I agree with you 100%, right? Real estate is a relationship business that results in a transaction. If you look at it, a transactional relationship that results in a relationship, you've got it turned inside out. That's it's just not, in the long run, it's not sustainable, that transactional approach. And I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but I would love it if you would share an example of maybe the story we talked about earlier about a time you were coached poorly, right? We've had really good examples of building a team and coming together, but I was really struck by at least one specific experience with one specific coach that didn't work. Because I think the reason I like this story is that it's easy as we're learning, especially if we're learning but either to be a leader or we're leading somebody that's new on the team, we might fall into a similar trap. If you'd be willing to share that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was having a really fantastic season. I can't remember what year it was, but having great races and really exceeding my own expectations of myself.
Yeah. And
as a Nordic or cross-country ski racer, we spend 5 months a year in Europe competing, and your team is kind of like your family. There's a lot of time spent together, and we had traveled from, I don't know, maybe Switzerland, and I know exactly, I remember it very vividly. We were in Slovenia, and I was in the start pen of a sprint race, a skate sprint race. And my coach, I had been doing really well. He put his hands on my shoulders. He looked at me and said, "Holly, you were the strongest one out here today. Go out and rip it." And I was just taken aback. And I was like, what? No, I'm not. Like, I'm having a great season, but I am not the strongest one out here. Right. And that really impacted the trust that I had with coach, because that right there was a perfect example of toxic positivity.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's really important in leadership positions. Not only do we have to understand what motivates the people that we're working with, right? But we have to understand that blowing smoke and, BS and stuff like that, by most people, is going to be viewed as incredibly inauthentic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so at that moment, which was, 5 minutes before my start, it just set me into a little bit of like a what? Like, not a tailspin, but I went out there and I had a horrible race. So I would love to, I was resilient enough to just, and I don't know that it was necessarily a result of that comment. But after that, I actually took it upon myself to approach that coach and say, hey, that comment that you made at the beginning, that did not resonate with me. And we need to address that. And so, he lost a little bit of trust with me in that moment. But rather than festering in resentment, I was able to address it because we had developed a sense of psychological safety. And I felt like he was approachable and open to feedback. And he was coming from this place. We had that sense of psychological safety where he didn't view my feedback as a personal attack, but he was able to view my feedback as a way to improve. And
feedback.
Feedback, right?
Yeah.
How do we get better? Cannot just see it as criticism, right? We have to view it as, this is performative, and receiving this feedback is going to help us move forward. And, we've actually talked about that moment, multiple times, in our relationship moving forward. And, I'm retired and he's actually still coaching, right?
Okay.
We've used that as an example. and it was because we had that sense of psychological safety that we were able to overcome, kind of that conflict.
Yeah, you can lose trust in the moment and still have trust in the bigger picture.
Exactly.
I think that was that number one, you have to be candid. You might have been we're having a great season.
Yeah.
That was not the comment but he didn't say that. He didn't.
Yeah.
It went to something that was inauthentic, as you said. So. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I resonate more with authentic comments, and something that would have landed really well for me at that moment was, Holly, you're having an amazing season, right? Like, like, I believe in you and I believe in yourself. Go out there and rip it, right? So
go out there and rip it. Yeah, you're gonna have a great day today. Yeah, go get it.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe like a more process oriented. That's more process oriented. It's not tied to an absolute. You are the best one out here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
Or I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not like I won the race like right before it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was. I could smell the BS, right?
All right. Before we wrap up, there is one question I didn't ask, and I am curious. What is something we don't know about, like, an Olympic village that we should? What is something that would surprise us? We see with the pictures on TV, but yeah.
It is really painted to be kind of this Disneyland-esque experience. Yeah. Everything's free, right? Everyone's eating McDonald's. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I guess there's lots of funny stuff that happens in the Olympic Village behind the scenes. And, I always say, as Nordic skiers, like, there are some people who have one event and they're done, and they just, maybe they party a little bit and celebrate. As Nordic skiers, we don't do that. We have the first race and the last race, and, we're competing the whole time. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a high pressure environment.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be really fun, but oftentimes it's a pretty stressful environment.
Got it.
It appears to be fun and like Disneyland from the outside, but that is not my experience.
Got it. That's awesome. So if people want to connect with you now, give us a minute or two on what you're doing now, how we can find you, and if we want more of Holly Brooks in our life, what do we do?
Perfect. My website is hollybrooks.com. I am technically a licensed therapist here in Alaska, but I am a mindset coach and a performance consultant. Email address is holly@hollybrooks.com. I have a couple of other projects. I am passionate about athlete and high performance mental health, but I am also really passionate about maternal mental health. I have another passion project called Moms Matter Now, and it is about empowering birthing people in the transition to parenthood and motherhood. So momsmatternow.com is another passion. I do a lot of eating disorder and body image work. So last year I added an executive producer to my CV, and so produced a documentary called Winning at All Costs: Breaking the Silence on Athletes and Eating Disorders. And the documentary is actually on Alaska Airlines on demand. So
very cool.
Check that out. I mean, it's also on YouTube, and you can search for it that way. But I have lots of passions, and I really thank you for inviting me to come talk to your team.
Thank you.
And I wish you all the best moving forward into this new market. And I would encourage you to evolve, right, and cope ahead and try out this strategy of how can we move forward with our cards down and work together so that we can move forward and ultimately make more of those sales, right?
Ask how, cards down, invite your competitors in, and then speak Norwegian. That's the takeaway.
Yes. Perfect.
Perfect. Holly, thank you so much. It has been a privilege and an honor to be with you today. Now, for those of you who are watching, you won't get this, but I have the opportunity to race against Holly or see Holly at the bike races every fall. So if I will see you before then, I hope, and at the very least, I'll see you out on the ski trails this winter. So
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have an amazing day. We'll talk soon.